Hi everybody, welcome to GTCoding. This is the full course on creating a responsive homepage, all the way from creating the design in Figma to turning it into a real website using HTML, CSS and JavaScript. I have combined all the videos in the playlist into this single long video. So this is how the website is gonna look. We have this hover effect for this image and this button. And we also have this search icon over here, and if I click on that, we have the search input field displayed over here. And if I click on the close button, it goes back. And it is also responsive. So this is how the smartphone version will look. And if I click on this menu icon, we have the navigation menu displayed over here. And if I click on this close icon, it goes back. So we will first design it in Figma, and then I'll show you how to turn it into a real website using HTML, CSS and JavaScript. Alright, so let's get started. Alright, so I have created a new file here in Figma, and first of all, let's go ahead and create a new frame. So we will select MacBook Pro. And before getting started with our design, let's create our color palette. So we will just create a rectangle of 120 width and 120 height. And we'll just add our colors over here. And we'll also add some border radius. Alright, so let's go over here and choose a fill color. So the first color is FFFFFA, and we'll also add some box shadow to make it visible. Alright, so let's duplicate this. And for the next color, we will set the fill to FF7200, and then we will duplicate it again. And for this one, we'll set the fill to 01847F, and then we'll duplicate these three using Ctrl D, and we will bring it down. So if you want to move the items in Figma, you can press the arrow keys. And if you press shift and then press the arrow keys, you can move 10 pixels. And if you want to see what is the distance between this item over here and this item, you can just select one of these items and then press Alt and hover over the other item, and you can see the distance between this item and the other item. So here we have the distance of 91 pixels. So let's click shift down arrow and then click up arrow once, and so here we have 100 pixels. Alright, so for the next color, we will choose 44A1A0, and for the next color we will choose 07393C, and for the last one we'll choose a color of 021718. Alright, so this is our color palette. So let's just rename this frame to colors. We'll also decrease the size. And if you want to increase or decrease the width or height of any element, you can simply press Ctrl and the arrow keys. So here we want to have 100 pixels on the right. So I'll just press Ctrl, Shift and right arrow. And now we have 103. So just press Ctrl and left arrow thrice. Alright, so we have our colors set up. Now let's create another frame for our home page. We'll select MacBook Pro and we'll rename it to home page. Now the first thing we'll do is create our navbar. So for that we'll create a rectangle and we'll set the height to 72 pixels, and we'll stretch it across our frame. And we'll also give it a drop shadow. So we'll set the blur to 24 pixels and the Y to 8 pixels, and we'll reduce the opacity to 10%. Alright, so we will also set the fill color, and we will select this color from here. Now we'll create our logo. So the logo is basically just some text. So let's go ahead and add a text. So we'll just type D dot, and the font that I have used is Poppins, and set the weight to extra bold, and we'll set the size to 64 pixels, and we have set it vertically to the center. Now we will also give it a left margin of 100 pixels. So right now it is 48, so we'll just move it on the right. Alright, so we'll also select the color of our text. We'll just select this dark color in our color palette. So now we'll create some menu items, but before that we'll just rename our logo. Alright, now we'll create the menu items. So we'll just duplicate this, and we will type blog, and then we'll set the font size to 24 pixels and the weight to regular. Alright, so we'll duplicate this and place it 100 pixels apart, and we'll name it contact, and we'll duplicate it once more and we'll say about. Alright, so let's select 3 of these by pressing shift, and we'll click on this icon to align them vertically. And we also need a magnifier icon. So for that we can use a plugin in Figma. So if you go to menu and go to plugins, and then go to manage plugins, you can find a lot of awesome plugins over here. So for the icon we'll be using a plugin called Material Design Icons. So just right click over here and go to plugins, and then click on Material Design Icons, and just type something you want over here. So we'll type search and click on that, and we can see the icon over here. We'll just move it to the right over here, and we'll just set it 100 pixels apart, and then we'll select all these menu items and click on vertically align. I think we can just increase the size a little. Now if you notice this, we can see that it is outside our home frame. So let's just drag it down to the home frame. Alright, now let's select all of these and we'll group it. So right click over here and click on group selection, and we'll name this group now items. And I think we need to add a little bit more margin to the left over here. So we'll just move it to 120 pixels, and we'll also give a 120 pixels margin right to this now items as well. Alright, so now let's go ahead and select 3 of these, and then group these, and we will type navigation. Alright, so we have created our navigation. Now let's create this photo over here. So for that we'll create a rectangle, and we'll set the height and width to 500 pixels. And we'll also give it a box shadow. So we'll go to effects and set the box shadow to 48 and 24, and we'll set the opacity to 50%. So for selecting the photo we can use a plugin called Content Reel. So first you have to install the plugin, and then right click over here, go to plugins, and then click on Content Reel, and then go to avatars, and then you can select something from here. So here we can see every time we click on this button we get a different avatar. So let's select this one for this design. Now we'll just duplicate this photo by pressing Ctrl D, and then we'll select one of these, and we'll just rotate it a little, and we'll remove this image from here, and we'll set the fill to a different color. So we'll set it to this color over here. Alright, so that's it with our image. Now let's go ahead and create this headline. and this text and this button. So before that, we'll just rename these layers. So for this one, we'll just type photo, and this is photo BG. Alright, so now let's go ahead and create a new text, and we'll just type our heading over here. Now we will set the weight to bold, and we'll set the size to 64 pixels. So for the heading, we'll set the font to Roboto, and we'll just set the color of the text to this color over here, and we'll just duplicate this and create the subheading, and we'll decrease the font size to 24 pixels and set this weight to regular, and we'll type some text over here. And let's go ahead and decrease the width of this text, and we'll set the line height to 42 pixels, and we'll just set the weight of this heading to black. Alright, now we'll set the spacing between these to 24 pixels. Now we'll create the contact button, so we will add a rectangle over here, and we'll set the width to 196 pixels and the height to 60 pixels, and we'll change the color to this color over here, and we'll also create a text, and we'll set the color of the text to this white color, and we'll also add a little bit of border radius. And now we'll select both of these and group it, and we'll type button, and we'll move it up a little. Now we'll select all of these, and we'll move it right here. Now we need to add some logos down here, so we want to have logos of Instagram, Dribble and Behance. So for that, we have a plugin in Figma called Brand Fetch. So just install the plugin and go to plugins, and then click on Brand Fetch, and you can get logo of pretty much any brand over here. So just type instagram.com, and we can see this logo of Instagram over here. So we'll once again go to plugins and brand fetch, dribble.com, and behance.net. We'll have a spacing of 42 pixels in between these. But here we can see we have this problem of decimal points. We have 46.57. So that is because in Instagram we have the width of 55.43. So let's just change it to 55. Alright, now we will set it to 42 pixels. And we'll also bring this down and set it to 42 pixels. And we'll select all of these, align it vertically, and we'll also create a group, and we'll type social icons. Now it is outside the home frame, so let's bring it down, and we'll set a bottom margin of 80 pixels, and for the left we want to have 120 pixels. Now the last thing to do is set this background color and this design over here. So let's select the frame and set the fill to this color over here. But this feels a little dark for our design, so we'll just decrease the opacity to say 50% or maybe 60%. And then we'll go ahead and select this color. So now we have that color selected, and we also have 100% opacity. Alright, now we'll draw these designs. So for that we will use the pen tool, and we'll just draw something like this, and we'll set the fill to this orange color over here, and we'll also bring it behind the navigation, and we'll remove the stroke, and we'll select this and reduce the opacity a little, and then we'll select this and duplicate it, and we'll just increase the size, and let's select this photo BG and remove the drop shadow. Alright, so that's basically it with the design of our home page. So we need to do three things in this video. The first one is to add an animation to this button. So when we hover over the button, we want it to move a little upward, and then we want to add a hover effect to this image. So when we hover over the image, we want the image to rotate, and lastly we need to have a search box appear when we click on this search button, and then when we click on the close button, it should disappear. Alright, so let's get started. Now the first thing we'll do is duplicate this frame. So click on that and hold Alt and then drag this. Now let's go back to the home page, and here we can see three tabs over here, and we have to go to prototype to do the animations. Now once you go to prototype, you can go ahead and select any of these elements from here, and when we hold our button, we can see we have this sign over here. We can drag this to the next frame. So let's click on it and drag it to the next frame. So now whatever changes we make over here will be considered as an animation for this frame. But before that, let's go and select this button, and we have to make some changes over here. So first of all, in interaction, we can see it is set to on click. So we have to change it to while hovering, and then under animation we can see it is set to instant. So we have to change it to smart animate, and we'll change this to ease in and out, and we'll leave it as 300 milliseconds. Now we'll go to the button animation frame, and we'll just move this button up a little. Alright, so now to see our animation, you have to click on this present button. And now we can see when we hover over the contact me button, we have this animation. We'll just set the zoom to scale down to fit. Now let's animate the image. So it is also pretty much the same. You just have to duplicate this home page frame. Now just click on this image and drag this thing over here to this frame, and we'll rename this frame to image animation, and we'll set the interaction to while hovering, and the animation is already set to smart animate, and we also have ease in and out. Alright, so now let's go ahead and rotate this a little. Now let's test the animation. So now when we hover over the image, we can see that it rotates. Now the last thing to do is we have to show a search box when we click on this icon. So for that we have to add some elements to our home page. So we'll go to the home page frame, and we will add a rectangle. We'll go back to the design tab, and we'll just give it a height of 67 pixels, and we'll move it to the right over here, and we'll just increase the width to up to here, and we'll also add a corner radius to two of these corners. So you have to click on this button called independent corners, and we'll change the corner radius for bottom right and bottom left. So we'll change it to 8 and 8, and we'll also change the color to this color over here, and we'll also add a box shadow. So just click on this plus icon in effects, and we'll just change this to 8, and change the opacity to 15. Alright, so now we'll add a text called search here. and we will set it to the center, and we'll have a left margin of 48, and we'll just decrease the opacity of our text. So we have set the opacity to 50%, and now we want to have the cursor. So for that we will just select the rectangle and we'll draw a cursor over here, and we'll change the color to this dark color over here. Alright, so that's it with our search box. And now we'll select these three elements of our search box, and we'll group it, and we'll name it search box, and we'll move it inside the navigation group. So here we have the search box. We'll just move it below the nav items, and in nav items we need to add one more thing, that is the cross icon. So just right click over here and go to plugins, material design icons, and we'll search for the close icon. So we'll just drag it up here, and we'll just move it outside this search icon. Right, we have this close icon over here. Now the size of our search icon is 30 width and 30 height. So let's go to the close icon, and we'll change it to 30 over here as well, and we'll position it to the exact position of the search icon, and we'll just move it up a little, and then just set the opacity to 0, and then we will select the search box, and we'll move it up, and we'll also move it below this rectangle. And I think that's it for the home page frame. Now let's just duplicate this home page frame, and now we'll go to prototype, and we'll select the search icon, and we'll just connect this to this frame over here, and here we'll make some changes. So first of all, we'll change the title to search box, and now we have to make some changes over here. So first of all, we have to show the search box. So just click on search box and bring it down, and then you have to show the close icon and hide the search icon. So double click over here, and this is the close icon. Now we want to bring this close icon down, and then set the opacity to 100%, and then we'll select the search icon and move it up a little, and we will set the opacity to 0. Now we'll just select the close icon, and we'll go to prototype, and we'll connect this to the home page frame, and we have the interaction set to on click, and for this home page frame we have set the connection from the search icon. I think I just connected the close icon over here as well, so we'll just remove this connection from here, and we will connect the search icon. So select this icon and then connect it to the frame below it. Alright, so that's it with our connections. Now let's test the search box. So now when we click on this search icon, we can see the search box appear over here, and we also have the close icon, and when we click on the close icon, it goes back to the search icon. And we also have the hover animations over here. Now the first thing we will do is we'll create a responsive version for screen width of 1280 pixels. So right now if I click on this frame, and here we can see we have set this design for a width of 1440 pixels. So let's create a new frame, or let's just duplicate this frame. Now the first thing we need to do is decrease the frame width. So first of all, let's change the name, and let's change the name to homepage 1280. And let's go inside this frame, and let's select all these elements, and let's bring all of them outside. And now let's select this, and let's choose a different width. So let's click on frame, and we will select iMac, which is 1280 into 720 pixels. Right, this is going to be the width of our frame. Now let's go ahead and add each of these elements inside our frame. So first of all, let's make some adjustments. So I'll just select this logo and let's decrease the font size to 50 pixels. And let's bring it to the center. Right now let's select the menu items and let's see what is the font size. And we have a font size of 24 pixels. So let's select all of these and let's set the font size to 20 pixels. And we will have a gap of 100 pixels between each of these. So let's bring this over here to the left. And let's also bring this over here to the left. And we'll also bring this icon to the left. Right now let's select all of this and let's bring it over here to the left. And we will decrease the width of this container rectangle to 1280 pixels. And here we can see this is the search box, so we can just delete it. And from the right we need to have a gap of 120 pixels because here on the left we have a padding of 120 pixels. So let's do the same over here. And here I think we also have the close button, so let's select that and let's just delete it. Right now let's have a gap of 120 pixels from the right. So let's bring this over here to the right. Right, that's basically it with the menu bar. Now let's drag this over here to our frame. So that's basically it with the menu bar. Right now let's bring all the other elements. So first of all let's select this BG shape and let's drag it over here to the right. And let's position it correctly. So I'll just position it over here on the top right. And let's also decrease the height. And now we need to send this behind this nav bar. So we can just drag it and drop it down here. Right now the next thing we will do is we will drag all these elements over here inside our frame. And let's make some changes. Let's change the font size of this to, let's try 20 pixels. And we'll also change the font size of this button. So let's change it to 20. And we'll also have a padding of 36 pixels from the left and the right. So let's just decrease the width. And from the top and the bottom we will have a padding of 8 pixels. Right, that's it with the left section. So I'll just bring this down a little bit. And let's select all of these. And let's bring this down a little bit. And I think that looks alright. Right now let's bring this image and this background rectangle. So let's select both of these and let's bring it over here. And we need to change the height and the width of this image. So we will decrease the height and the width to, let's try 360 pixels. And we'll also set the height and the width of this rectangle to 360 pixels. And let's position this correctly. And I think that looks alright. So let's select both these elements and we'll just create a group. So I'll just press Command G and let's name it Hero Image. And now let's align this correctly. So from the right we will have a gap of 120 pixels. Now here we can see we have some decimal value. That's because we have grouped this rotated rectangle over here with this image. So I'll just select this image and from the right we will have a gap of 120 pixels. And now let's select this background and let's just bring it over here. And let's select both of these and let's just align it correctly. We'll also have a gap of 120 pixels from the left. So let's select all of these and let's move it to the right. Alright, that's it with the 1280 version. Now let's create the smartphone version. So let's click on Frame and let's click over here. And let's go over here to Frame and let's select one of these templates from here. Let's just select iPhone 11 Pro and let's change the name to smartphone. Alright, the first thing we need to do is change the background color. So let's click on this fill and let's choose this color right here. Right now let's duplicate this menu bar and bring it down here. And here we'll make some changes and add it to the smartphone version. So the first thing we will do is we'll just remove these menu items.
and we will set the width of this to the same as this frame. So let's select this frame, and we have a width of 375 pixels. So let's select this rectangle, and let's set the width to 375. And now let's decrease the font size of this logo. So let's select this, and let's set the font size to, let's try 24 pixels. And we'll also decrease the height of this menu bar. So let's select this rectangle, and let's set the height to 48 pixels. Now let's bring this logo to the left, and from the left we will have a gap of 30 pixels. And here on the right side we will have a menu icon. So let's select this rectangle, and let's create a menu icon. So I'll just create a rectangle over here, and let's set the width to, let's try 24 pixels, and let's leave the height as 4 pixels, and we'll also add a corner radius of 4. And let's change the color of this to this dark color right here. And now let's duplicate this, and we will have a gap of, let's try 6 pixels, and I think that looks alright. So let's select both of these, and let's make it a group, and let's change the name to menu icon. Now we'll also add a padding around this menu icon. So for that, let's add an auto layout. So you can just press Shift and A, and now we have this auto layout. And let's change the padding over here. Let's change it to, let's try 4 pixels and 4 pixels, and I think that looks alright. Alright, let's bring it to the center, and from the right we will have a padding of 30 pixels. So let's bring it to the left. Now this menu item is outside this navigation group, so let's drag it and bring it over here. Right now let's add this inside our frame. So let's just drag it over here to the top. And now the next thing we will do is bring this image. So let's drag it outside, and we'll just remove the background element. So let's delete this, and we'll just decrease the size, and let's drag it over here. And from the left and the right we will have a gap of 30 pixels. So let's increase it, and that looks alright. Now let's draw a background shape for this smartphone version. So let's go over here to this pen tool, and let's create a simple shape. Alright, so this is a simple shape that I drew, and let's select this, and let's remove the stroke, and we will add a fill, and let's set the color to this color right here, and we'll set the opacity to, let's try 25, and I think that looks alright. Now let's bring the other elements. So let's copy these 3 elements from here, let's duplicate it and bring it down here, and we will change the font size. So for this we'll change the font size to, let's try 40 pixels, and I think that looks alright. Let's change the font size of this to 16 pixels. We'll also change the font size of this button, and let's change it to 16 pixels, and let's decrease the width and the height of this. We will have a padding of 30 pixels on the left and the right. Right, let's bring it to the top, and I think we can decrease the line height a little bit. I think this looks alright. Right, now let's select all of this and drag it over here inside this frame, and from the left we will have a gap of 30 pixels. And then lastly we need to copy these icons. So let's drag it over here, and we'll just decrease the size. So let's decrease it to, let's try 30 pixels, and we'll also decrease this to, let's try 24, and let's decrease this to 24 as well. And let's just bring this over here to the left, and we'll do the same for this logo. Now let's select all of these, and let's bring it over here inside this frame, and from the right we will have a gap of 30 pixels. And now let's select all of these, and let's bring it to the center. So let's click on Align Vertical Centers, and we'll also click on this button, and let's click on Tidy Up. So now everything looks alright. So that's basically it with the smartphone version. Now in the next video I'll show you how to add the menu items for the mobile version. So we will add an animation, and when we click on this menu icon we want the mobile menu items to be displayed over here. And we'll also have a close icon, and when we click on the close icon, the menu icons will be hidden. So we will do that in the next video. Now the first thing we need to do is we need to create a frame. So I'll just duplicate this frame. So I just press Option, or if you're using Windows, you can just press Alt and drag this over here. And now we have one more frame with the same height and width. Now let's delete all of these elements from here. So we don't need any of these. And let's delete all of these. And we'll also change the background color. So let's select this frame and let's change the background color to a light color. So I'll just select this one right here. Now the next thing we need to do is we need to change this menu icon into a close icon. So let's double click over here, and inside this frame we have these two rectangles. So we'll just change the rotation of the first rectangle, and let's set it to 45 degrees. And let's select the second rectangle and let's set the rotation to -45 degrees. And now we need to bring this rectangle to the top. So we cannot drag it right now because we are using auto layout. So let's select this and let's remove the auto layout. So I'll just click on ungroup, and now let's select these rectangles and let's position this correctly. And now let's select both of these rectangles. And now if we add auto layout, it will again go to the same place. So first of all, we need to change this into a vector. So let's right click over here and click on flatten. Right now we can see this is a single shape, and we don't have two rectangles over here. We just have one vector. So here we have width and height in points. So let's change this to 18. Right now let's add the auto layout for the padding. So let's press Shift A and let's set the padding to 4 pixels. And let's bring it to the center. And from the right we will have a gap of 30 pixels. So let's bring it over here to the right. Right now the next thing we need to do is add all the menu items. So if you go over here to the desktop version, we have these menu items over here. So let's double click and I'll just drag it over here into this smartphone frame. And we also need to change the name of this frame. So let's just change the name of this frame to smartphone menu items. And here we have all these menu items. So I'll just bring all of these one below the other. So I'll just select this and bring it down over here, and we will have a gap of 30 pixels. And let's bring this down here, and we also need to bring this search icon, and we'll also add the search field over here. So let's scroll up and let's copy this search field, and let's duplicate it and bring it over here. And we need to bring this inside this nav items group. So let's just drag it and bring it over here. And now let's bring this search icon over here, and I'll just bring it to the top. And we'll also bring both of these over here to the right. And now let's bring this nav items group inside our frame. And from the left we will have a gap of, let's try 50 pixels. And now let's bring this search input field to the left. So we will have a gap of 30 pixels from the left. So let's move it over here to the left. And let's decrease the width of this search input field. So let's select this rectangle and let's decrease the width. And from the right we will have a gap of 30 pixels. And I think we can decrease the font size of this placeholder. So let's change the font size and let's try 18 pixels, or let's try 20 pixels. And I think that looks alright. Right now let's select this cursor and this text, and from the left we will have a gap of 24 pixels. And we'll also decrease the height of this rectangle. Let's bring this over here to the top. Right now let's bring the search icon. So it is right here. Let's bring it over here to the left, and let's move it inside the search box group. And from the right we will have a gap of 24 pixels. And let's bring it to the center. Alright, that's it with the menu items of the smartphone version. Now let's add the prototype, and let's add the animation when we click on this menu icon. So for that we have to go to prototype, and let's select this icon, and let's drag this over here to this frame. And here we have this pop-up. So let's select on click, and instead of navigate to, let's choose open overlay, and then here we have the animation. So let's choose a different animation. So let's choose move in, and we want it to move in from the right, and let's change the easing to slow. Right now let's close this, and let's add the action for the close button. So let's click on this, and let's click and drag it over here to close overlay. Right now let's see whether it works. So let's click on this frame, and let's click on present, and here we have our screen. So let's click on this menu icon, and we have the mobile menu items displayed over here, and let's click on the close icon, and it goes back. So everything is working all right. We have different versions of this design. We have this design which has a screen width of 1280 pixels, and then if you scroll up, we have these designs over here. This is for larger screens, and we also have a smartphone version where this is how it looks, and we also have this navigation menu, and we also have some hover effects and some animations. So let me just show you that. So here's our design, and if I hover over this image, we have this rotation hover effect, and if I hover over this button, we have this hover effect, and then we have this search icon over here, and if I click on that, we have this animation where the input field is displayed over here, and when we click on this close button, it goes back. So these are the hover effects and the animation for this design. And for the mobile version also we have some animation. So this is the mobile version, and if I click on this menu icon, we have the navigation menu of the mobile version displayed over here, and if I click on this close icon, it goes back. So we're going to turn all of this into a real website using HTML, CSS and JavaScript. So let's get started. So the first thing you need to do is export all these images. So I will leave the link of the Figma file in the description, and you can open the Figma file and just select all these images and export them. So I'll just show you an example. So if you want to export this image, just select the image, and then if you go to the design tab, and if you scroll down, here we have the option called export, and if you click on preview, you can see how the image will look. Now before exporting the images, make sure that you don't have any effect for the image. We will add the effects using CSS. So right now for this image we have this drop shadow effect, so let's hide the effect. And now we can see for the image we don't have any effect. Now you can just select PNG from here, and just click on export photo, and then you'll be able to save this image as a PNG in your system. And after exporting the image, make sure that you turn this effect back on. Now in the same way, just go ahead and export all these other images. So you need to export this background shape as well. So just select this square and go over here to export. Now for this you have to make sure that you're exporting as an SVG. So just select SVG from here because this is a shape. So whenever you have any icons or shapes or any kind of vector, you can just export them as SVG. And you also need to export this background shape. So just select the background shape and then just export it as an SVG. And in the same way, export this search icon, these three logos over here, and also these icons for the mobile version. So you need to export this menu icon and also this close icon. Alright, once you have exported all those images, just store them inside a folder. Now for writing the code, I'm going to use this code editor called VS Code. This is one of the most used code editors out there, and you can just download it for free. Just search for VS Code download. And here we can see I have created this folder called responsive homepage, and I opened it with VS Code. And here we can see I have this folder called images, and in that we have all these images which I just exported from Figma. Alright, now let's go ahead and start creating the files. So we need to create an HTML file, a CSS file and a JavaScript file. So you can just click on this button called new file, and let's create a file called index.html, and we also need to create a file called style.css, and then we also need to create a file called main.js. Now first of all, let's start with the index.html file. Now in VS Code you have this shortcut where you can just press exclamation and press tab, and you'll have this basic HTML5 code. And here for the title I'll just type welcome, and here I'll just type link and press tab, and here in the href I'll just type style.css. So now we have connected our CSS file to this index.html file. Now let's also connect the JavaScript file. So here in the body, let's type script:/src and press tab, and in the src I'll just type main.js. Now for this design we are using two different fonts. So we are using this font called pop-ins, and we are using the extra bold version and also this version right here, regular. And then we are also using this font called Roboto, and even for that we are using the bold and the regular versions. So let's get the link of these fonts from Google Fonts. Right here I'm in fonts.google.com, and you can just search for the fonts over here. So I'll just type Roboto, and here we have this font. Let's click on the font, and we need to select two different styles. So let's select the regular 400. So I'll just click on this plus button, and let's scroll down, and we'll also select this black 900. So let's click on this plus. Right now let's go back and let's also select the Poppins font. So I'll just type Poppins over here, and let's select this font. And even for this we need to have the regular and the bold versions. So let's select regular 400, and let's scroll down, and I'll just select extra bold 800. And here we can see we have these two fonts with both the styles. Now here we have the link that we can add into our HTML. So let's copy this link from here, and let's go back to our HTML, and let's paste the link over here in the head section. Right now let's start writing the HTML for our design. So if you go back to the Figma file, this is how our design is gonna look. And here we can see at the beginning we have this menu bar, and we have this logo over here on the left, and we have all these menu items and the search icon on the right. So for that let's go back to our HTML, and let's create a nav element for that. So here we can see we have a fixed width for these elements. So I'll also create a container division. Let's create a division with the class of wrapper, and in that the first thing we need to have is this logo. So let's create an anchor tag, and here I'll just type hash for the href, and let's give it a class of logo so that we can style it in the CSS. And let's type d dot over here, just like we have over here. And the next thing we need to have are these menu items. So for that let's create a division, and let's give it a class of menu items. And in that we need to have the links for these menu items. So let's create anchor tags for that, and you can add the links of the pages over here. I'll just type hash for now, and the first one is blog. So here we'll just type blog, and we need to have two more elements. So let's duplicate this, and for the second one we have contact, and then we have about. So let's type contact and about, and then we have this search icon over here. So for that let's create a division. So let's create a division with the class of search icon container, and in that we will have an img tag, and for the source I'll just type images / and I have saved this image as search icon.svg. So let's select that, and we'll also give it a class of search icon. Right now let's go back to our Figma file, and the next thing we need to have are these elements over here. So here on the left side we have this text content, and on the right side we have this image. Now for this section I'll just create a main element. So let's go outside the nav, and let's type main, and let's also give it a class of hero section. Now in the hero section we will also have this wrapper division, because we have the fixed width for this hero section as well. So here we can see for both these elements we have the same width. So let's create a wrapper division over here, and now we'll create two divisions, one for the left and one for the right. So let's create a division with the class of left, and let's also create a division with the class of right. And here on the left the first thing we need to have is this heading. So let's create an h1, and let's type hi, I am Darlene. And the next thing we need to have is this text. So let's copy this, and let's go back, and let's create a paragraph over here, and let's paste the text over here. And the next thing we need to have is this button. So for that let's create an anchor tag, and let's also give it a class of btn, and here we need to have contact me displayed. So let's type contact me. Right, that's it with the left section. Now on the right section we need to have the image and also this background element. So let's go back, and here in the right section let's create a division, and let's give it a class of hero image container. And let's create an img tag, and in the src I'll just type images/hero image.png, and let's also create one more img tag, and here in the sources I'll just type images/hero image bg.svg. Now I don't know whether we should use this hero image bg for the background element, because we can also create it using a division. I'll just let it be here for now. We'll change it later. And then we also need to have these social media icons. So let's go outside this right division, and here we'll create a division with the class of social. Now here we need to have these three logos, so let's create anchor tags for that, and here you can add the link of your social media pages. And here in the anchor tag, let's create an img tag, and let's type images/, and the first one is Instagram, so let's type Instagram logo.svg, and let's copy this anchor tag and paste it 2 more times. And the second one is Behance, so let's change this to Behance logo. And the third one is Dribble, so we have an image with Dribble logo.svg. And then lastly we need to have this background shape that we have over here. So let's go outside this wrapper division, and let's create an img tag, and here let's type images/bgshape.svg, and let's also give it a class of bgshape. Right, I think that's it for the HTML of our design. Now let's open this in our browser and let's see how it looks. So I have this extension installed over here called Live Server. So once you install that, you can just right click over here in the HTML and click on Open with Live Server. And here we can see our website. We have all the elements displayed over here. So that's basically it with the HTML of our design. Right, now let's start with the CSS of our design. So if you go back to our Figma file, here we can see this is how it looks. Now the first thing we will do is we will design this version right here. So this is the 1280 version, and then we will add some media queries and then design these versions and also this smartphone version. So let's go back to our source code, and here we can see we have already linked our style.css file. So let's go to our style.css file, and the first thing we will do is we will add the colors as variables. So let's type :root, and this will be accessible throughout our CSS. So let's create some variables for these colors right here. So first of all, let's click on this color, and we have this hex code. So let's copy this code from here, and let's create a variable. So we can just type --, and the name of the variable. Let's name it light color, and then we will add the hex code over here. So I'll just type hash and paste the values over here. So this is the variable for the light color. Now let's create another variable for this orange color. So let's copy this hex code from here, and let's create a variable called orange color, and let's paste the code over here. And then we have this color right here. So let's copy this code from here, and let's name it teal green color, and let's paste the code over here. And I think we don't need to have this color right here, because we are using just this color in our website. We are not using this color, and we are also not using this color right here. So let's directly copy this color right here. So let's copy this hex code from here, and let's create a variable called dark color, and let's paste the code over here. Right, that's it with the variables of our design. Now let's set the box sizing to border box for all the elements so that we have the correct height and width for all the elements. Now if you want to know more about box sizing border box, I have a video on that. I will leave the link in the description of this video. Alright, let's select all the elements, and let's also select the before and the after selectors for all the elements. So let's type *::, after, and *::, before, and let's set the box sizing to border box. Right, now the next thing we will do is we will set some styles for the body. So let's type body, and first of all we will set the font family to Roboto, because that's the font that is commonly used over here in our design. So if you go back to the HTML file, here we can see we have already added the link of the fonts over here. So we have Poppins 400/800 and Roboto 400/900. So here I'll just set the font family to Roboto and sans serif as a backup. And we'll also reset the margin of the body. So let's type margin 0, and let's also set the color of all the text to the dark color that we added over here. So let's type color, and we will add this variable. So we can just type var, and here I'll just type hyphen dark color. Right now if you go back to our design, here we can see this is how it looks. The font has changed and we also don't have the margin for the body. Now let's add some styles to the wrapper. So if you go back to our HTML file, here we can see we have created this division with the class of wrapper. Now we have this wrapper division inside the nav and also the main. So the wrapper should have a fixed width. So if you go back to our Figma design, here we can see our content has a fixed width. So this is the width of the wrapper. So let's see what is the width of the wrapper. We can just add a rectangle over here. And let's resize this to match with this width. And now we can see if we take a look at the width, we have a width of 1040 pixels. So we'll just delete this rectangle and let's go back to our CSS. And let's target the wrapper division. So let's type dot wrapper. And let's set the width to 1040 pixels. And we also need to bring it to the center. So let's type margin and let's set the margin to 0 for top and bottom and auto for left and right. And now if you go back to our design, here we can see we have a width of 1040 and we have all the elements aligned in the center. You can just add a background color and check it. So now we can see we have a width of 1040 pixels for the wrapper. Now the next thing we will do is style the nav. So if you go back to our Figma design, this is how the nav looks. Here if I click on this nav, here we can see we have a height of 72 pixels. So let's go back to our CSS and here we can see for the nav we have a nav element. So let's target this. Let's add a comment and let's type nav bar. And here I'll just type nav and let's set the height to 72 pixels. And we also have this light color for the background. So let's type background and let's set the color to var light color, which we created over here. And let's go back to our Figma file and we also have a box shadow. So let's click on this rectangle and if you go to this inspect tab over here and if you scroll down, here we can see we have the CSS of this element. So let's copy this box shadow from here and let's paste it over here. And now if you go back to our design, here we can see this is our nav bar and we have this box shadow. Now the next thing we will do is we will fix this nav bar to the top. So we will set a position of fixed and let's also set the top to 0. And now we can see we don't have the correct width. So for that we have to type left 0 and right 0. And now we have the full width for this nav bar. We'll also set the z index to a higher value so that it is above all the other elements. So let's type z index and let's set it to 200. Right now the next thing we need to do is we need to display all these elements one next to the other. So if we go back to our Figma design, here we can see we have the logo at the left and then we have these menu items and then we have this search icon. And if you go back to our browser, here we can see all these elements are one below the other. So let's go back to our CSS and in the nav we have a wrapper division and in the wrapper division we have this logo and then we have this division right here. So let's target this wrapper division inside the nav. So here I'll just type nav wrapper and let's set the display to flex so that all the elements are one next to the other. And now we can see we have the logo on the left and these elements on the right. Now we want to have a gap between the logo and these menu items. So if you go to the Figma design, we have both these elements at the extreme left and right. So for that we have to type justify content and set it to space between. And let's also vertically align everything to the center. So let's type align items to the center. And now if you go back to our browser, here we can see we have the logo on the left and all these elements on the right. Now we have set the align items to the center, but they are not in the center vertically. So if I just add a background color over here, here we can see we don't have the full width for this wrapper. So let's type height 100% and everything is aligned in the center. So let's remove this background color. And now the next thing we will do is we need to bring both these elements one next to the other. So if you go back to our HTML file, here we can see we have this division with the class of menu items and in that we have all these anchor tags and also this search icon. So we need to add a display of flex for these menu items. So let's go back to our CSS and let's type nav menu items and let's set the display to flex and we will have a gap between all these elements. So if we go back to our Figma design and if I take a look at the gap, Here we can see we have a gap of 100 pixels between these elements. So let's go back and let's type gap of 100 pixels. Right now the next thing we will do is style this logo. So let's go back to our Figma Design and let's double click on this logo. And now if you go to inspect and scroll down, we have the styles of this logo. So we have the color set to the dark color, and we have a font size of 50 pixels, and then we also have a font weight of 800, and we have a font family of pop-ins. So let's copy these styles from here and let's go back to our CSS. And if you take a look at the logo, here we can see for the logo we have a class of logo. So let's target that. Let's type logo and let's paste the styles over here. And we also need to add sans serif. And we don't need to have this font style over here, so we can just remove it. And we also need to set the color of this logo to the dark color. So let's type var dark color. And if you go back to our browser, here we can see the logo, but we don't need to have this underline. So let's type text decoration and set it to none. And now we have the logo displayed correctly. Right now let's style these menu items. So let's go back to our Figma file and let's select one of these menu items. And if you scroll down, here is the CSS of the menu items. So for this also we have the dark color. And I think what we can do is we can go to our CSS and we will set the color of all the anchor tags to the dark color. So here we have already set all the text color to dark color. Now the anchor tags have the color of its own. So here let's also type A and let's set the color to the dark color. And we'll also remove the underlines because we don't need to have the underlines for all the anchor tags. So let's type text decoration and set it to none. And now let's scroll down and we can just remove these 2 lines of code from here. Right now let's style these menu items. So for the menu items we have these anchor tags inside the menu items division. So let's target that. Here I'll just type nav menu items A. And let's go back to our Figma file and let's copy some of these styles from here. So we need to copy the font size, font weight and font family. So let's copy all of this and let's paste it over here. And for the font family we need to set it to sans serif, and we can just remove this font style from here. And now if you go back to our browser, this is how it looks. Right, that's it with the nav bar. Now let's style this hero section. So if you go back to our HTML, here we can see we have this main element with a class of hero section. So let's go back to our CSS and let's create a comment. Let's type hero section and let's target the hero section over here. And first of all let's add a background color. So if you go back to our Figma file, here we can see we are adding this orange color as the background color. So let's go back and let's type background and let's set it to var, and we have created a variable called orange color. And let's go back to our browser and this is how it looks. Now let's set the height of this hero section to 100 viewport height, which is 100% of the browser window. So let's type height 100 viewport height. And now if you go back to the Figma file, here we can see these elements are one next to the other. So we have this text content over here on the left, and then we have this image on the right. So if you go back to our HTML, here we can see we have created these 2 divisions over here inside the wrapper. We have the left division and the right division. So what we will do is we will target the wrapper inside the hero section, and let's set the display to flex so that these elements are one next to the other. So let's type hero section wrapper and let's set the display to flex, and we'll also align items to the center and justify content to space between so that we have both the elements to the extreme left and right. So this is how it looks right now. Now we have these social media icons displayed over here, and we also have these background shape displayed over here. So we'll just hide them for now. So if you go back to our HTML file, we have this division with the class of social, and we also have this image with the class of BG shape. So here I'll just create a comment, hidden items, and let's type hero section social and also BG shape, and let's set the display to none. And I think we'll also remove this background shape from here, and we'll create it using CSS and HTML. So let's go back to our HTML, and This is the background shape, so let's just delete this and we'll create a division and we'll just give it a class of hero image bg. Right now if we go back to our browser, here we can see we have these elements over here. Now these elements are not exactly in the center because it is also counting the height of this nav bar. So let's go back to our CSS and here for the wrapper, let's set the height to calc and we'll set it to 100 viewport height minus the height of our nav bar. So if you scroll up, for the nav bar we have a height of 72 pixels. So let's type 72 pixels over here. And now if we add a background color over here, here we can see this is the height of our hero section right now. Now we also need to add some padding at the top so that it moves to the bottom over here. So let's type padding top and let's set it to 72 pixels. And we'll also remove this background color. So now we can see these elements are exactly in the center. Right now let's style the H1. So let's go back to our Figma file and let's click on this H1. And these are the styles of the H1. So let's copy the styles that we need. So we need to have the font size, the font weight, and that's it. We have already set the color to the dark color. So let's copy this and let's go back to our CSS. And here we can see we have an H1. So let's type hero section H1 and let's paste these two styles over here. And we'll also remove the margin of this H1. So let's type margin 0. Right now let's get the styles of this paragraph. So let's go back to our Figma file and let's click on this paragraph. And here we have the styles. We have the font size set to 20 pixels and font weight to 400, and we have the line height set to 42 pixels. So let's copy these 3 lines of code. And if you go back to our HTML, here we can see we have a paragraph. So let's type hero section P and let's copy the styles over here. And now if we go back to our browser, this is how it looks. Now if we go back to the Figma file, here we can see we have a fixed width for this text. So here we can see we have a width of 418 pixels. So let's set a fixed width for our text over here in the CSS. So I'll just round it to width of 420 pixels. And this is how it looks right now. Right now let's style this button. So if you go back to our Figma file, this is how the button looks right now. So let's double click over here and let's go to inspect, and here we can see this is the font size of the button. So let's copy this font size from here and let's go back to our CSS. Let's see what is the class. So for the button we have an anchor tag with a class of btn. So let's go back to our CSS file and let's type hero section btn and let's paste the font size over here. And we also need to copy the styles of this rectangle. So let's select the rectangle and we can see we have a border radius of 8 pixels and we have this teal green color. So let's copy this style from here and let's paste it over here, and let's set the background color to the var that we have created, which is teal green color. And let's also set a padding. So here we can see we have a padding of 8 pixels for the top and bottom and 36 pixels for left and right. So let's type padding 8 pixels and 36 pixels. And we also need to set the color of the text to the light color. So let's type color and let's set it to var light color. And I think we can increase the top and bottom padding a little bit more. So let's go back to our CSS and let's set the top and bottom padding to, let's try 16 pixels or let's try 12 pixels, and I think that looks alright. Now here, since the button is an anchor tag, it is set to display of inline. So if I just increase the padding a little bit more, so if I just set it to 32 pixels, we can see that it touches this paragraph over here. So what I will do is I'll just set the display to inline block, and now we can see we have the correct spacing between these elements. Now we also have a hover effect when we hover over this button. So if you go back to our Figma file and if I just take a look at this design right here, I'll just go over here to prototype and let's click on present. And now if you hover over this button, we can see that we have this hover effect. So let's add that over here in our CSS. So if you go back to our inspect and if you take a look at this button, And here we can see we have a spacing of 32 pixels, and here we have a spacing of 24 pixels. So we are moving it up 8 pixels. So let's go back to our CSS, and let's create a hover effect. So let's type hero section btn:hover, and let's set the transform translate y to -8 pixels, and we'll also have a smooth animation. So let's type transition of all to 400 milliseconds ease. And now if you go back to our browser, and if you hover over this button, we have this hover effect. So I think that's basically it with the left part of our hero section. Right, now let's start styling this right section over here. So let's go back to our CSS, and if you go to the HTML, here we can see for the right section we have this division with the class of right. So let's target that. Let's go over here to style our CSS, and here I'll just type hero section right, and I think we need to have a margin top of 72 pixels for this right section. So let's type margin top of 72 pixels, and now we can see that the image is exactly in the center. And I think we also need to add the margin top for this left division. So if you right click over here and go to inspect, and if we click on the left division, for the wrapper we already have a padding top of 72 pixels, and I think we can change this into a margin top. So let's try that. And I think if we add margin top, then the problem is solved for both the divisions. So let's go back to the wrapper, and we can just remove this margin top from here, and let's go to the wrapper, and here we can see for the hero section wrapper we have set a padding top. Let's change this to margin top, and now we can see everything looks alright. So let's start styling this image right here. Now if you go to the HTML file, here we can see for the image we have this division with the class of hero image container, and in that we have the image, and we also have this division for the hero image bg. Right, let's target the hero image container from here. So here I'll just type hero section hero image container, and now let's open the Figma Design, and let's select this image. And here we can see for the image we have a height and width of 360 pixels. So let's go back to our CSS, and here I'll just set the height to 360 pixels and also the width to 360 pixels. Now this is the height and width for the image container. Now we need to add the height for the image as well. So let's type hero section hero image container img, and let's set the height to 360 pixels. And now we can see we have the image with the correct height. Now the next thing we need to do is create the image background. So if you go to the Figma file, here we can see we have this background shape over here for the image, and even for this we have a height and width of 360 pixels, but we have this rotation over here. We'll just round it to 6 degrees, and let's go back to our CSS, and now let's target this background shape. So for the background shape we have this division with the class of hero image bg, and we're going to set the position of the hero image bg relative to the hero image container. So here we can see this is the hero image container. So we need to set the position of the hero image container to relative. So here I'll just tap position relative, and now let's target the hero image bg. So let's tap hero section hero image container hero image bg, and let's set the position to absolute, and let's set the top and the left position to 0, and we'll also set the height and the width of this hero image bg to 360 pixels. And now let's add a background color, and let's set it to the variable that we created, which is called teal green color. And now if you go back to our browser, here we can see we have this background shape, and we also need to rotate it 6 degrees. So let's go back, and let's type transform rotate z, and let's set it to -6 degrees. Now here we can see that the hero image bg has the correct rotation. Now we need to send this hero image bg behind this actual image. So for that, let's go back to our CSS, and let's set the z index to -1. And now if we go back to our browser, we can see that the element is not being visible at all. So for that we need to go back to the container division, which is hero image container, and we have to set a property called isolation, and we have to set it to isolate. And now we can see that the hero image BG is being displayed correctly. Now we also need to have a hover effect for this hero image BG. So if you go back to our Figma file, and let's just present this so that we can see the animation. So let's go to prototype, and we have already selected the first frame, and let's click on present. So here's our website, and if I hover over this image, we can see that the image rotates. So we need to add this hover effect. So let's go back to our CSS, and let's target the image. So for the image we have this img tag. Now we'll also add a class so that we can select it in the CSS. So let's type class, and let's set it to hero image. Right now let's go back to our CSS, and let's target the hero image. So let's type hero section, hero image container, hero image, and we will add a hover effect for this hero image container. So let's type hover, and here we'll just type transform rotate Z, and let's set it to -6 degrees, just like we did for the hero image BG. And now if you hover over the image, we can see that the hover effect is working. We also need to add a smooth transition. So let's go back to our CSS, and let's target this hero image once again. So let's type hero section, hero image container, hero image, and let's type transition, and let's set it to all 400 milliseconds ease. And now if you go back to our browser, and if you hover over this image, we can see that we have the correct hover effect. Right now let's add the background shape. So let's go back to our CSS, and here in the HTML we can see that for the background shape we have this img tag with a class of bg shape. So here we have this background shape, this shape right here. So let's go back to our CSS, and let's target this bg shape, and here we can see we have already hidden that. So let's remove it from here, and here I'll just type bg shape, and let's set the position to absolute, and we'll set the top position to 0 and the right position to 0, and we'll set the height to 100%. Now if you go back to our browser, here we can see that the background shape is on top of this image. So what we will do is we'll bring the whole wrapper division on top of the bg shape. So if you go back to our HTML, here we can see we have this wrapper division inside the hero section, and then we have this bg shape outside this wrapper. So let's go back to our style.css file, and let's go to the wrapper. So here we have the selector for the hero section wrapper. So let's set the z index to a higher value. So let's type 10. Now for the bg shape we already have set a position of absolute, so we need to set some kind of position over here for the wrapper to make this z index work. So let's set the position to relative, and now we can see that the bg shape is behind this wrapper division, but we cannot see it clearly. So let's right click over here, and let's click on inspect, and let's see what's the problem. So if we select this bg shape, we can see that it is already there. So let's select this hero section, and I think we need to change the background color. So if I just change this to, let's try red, now we can see that the bg shape is being displayed. So we need to change the background color of this design. So if you go back to our Figma Design, and let's select this frame, and here we can see this is the hex code for the background color. It is F5A05C, and if you go back to our CSS variables, we have a different color over here for the orange color. So let's add this color. I think we had set the variable according to this color right here, but we had used a different color in our design. So I'll just change this hex code. So let's copy this from here, and let's paste it over here. Right now let's go back to our browser, and now we can see everything looks alright. We have the background shape being displayed over here, and we also have the hover effect working alright. Right now the next thing we will do is we will add the social media icons. So if you go back to our Figma file, here we can see we have these 3 icons over here at the bottom. So let's go back to our HTML, and for the social media icons we have this division with the class of social, and in the style.css file we have already hidden that. So let's just remove it from here, and here I'll just type hero section social. Now we need to position this to the bottom of the screen. So here we can see we have these three icons at the bottom. So let's set the position to absolute. Let's set the position to bottom, and let's try 20 pixels. Now we can see we have these icons over here. Now let's align them to the center. So let's set the display to flex and align items to the center. And now we can see they are aligned in the center. Now let's add some gap between these icons. So if you go back to our Figma file, here we can see we have a gap of 42 pixels. So let's add a gap of 42 pixels over here. So let's type gap 42 pixels. And now we can see it looks alright. Right now it's time for us to create the search box. So let's go back to our Figma file. And if you go back to the prototype, here we can see if we click on this search button, we have this search box displayed over here. And if I click on this close button, it goes back. So let's start writing the HTML for this search box. Let's go back to our code and let's go to the HTML file, and here before the nav, I'll just create a division for the search input field. So I'll just create a division with the class of search input container. And in that, let's create an input of type text, and let's add a placeholder and let's type search here. Right now if you go back to our design, here we can see we have the search box at the top left. It is behind the nav bar at the moment. Right now let's add the styles to the search box. So let's go back to our CSS file. So here I'll just create a comment and let's type search input. And let's target the division. So we have a class called search input container. And first of all, let's set the position to absolute. And we need to position it right here below this search button. Let's set the top to 0 and the right to 0. And we will add a class called active to the search box when we want it to be displayed. So if you go back to our Figma file, here we can see we have the animation where the search box comes down from the top. So by default it will be behind this menu bar. So let's go back to our CSS and let's add some styles for the active class. So let's go back to our HTML file, and for the input field, let's also add a class of active for testing. And let's go back to our style.css file, and let's type search input container input. And when we have the active class, we will move it 72 pixels to the bottom because the height of this nav bar is 72 pixels. So here I'll just type .active to target the active class, and here I'll just type transform translate y, and let's set it to 72 pixels. Right now let's go back to our browser, and we cannot see the input field right now, so let's right click over here and click on inspect, and let's see where the input field is located. So let's click on this search input container and let's click on input, and here we can see that the input is in the correct place from the top. So we need to add a z index for this search input container. So let's go back to our CSS, and here let's type z index and let's set it to, let's try 10. And now we can see that the search input field is displayed over here. Right now the next thing we need to do is we need to move this search input field over here on the left. We need to align it to this search button right here from the right. So let's right click over here and let's check what is the width of this menu bar. So here we can see for the wrapper we have a width of 1040 pixels. You can see it right here, 1040 pixels. So let's set the width of this search input container to 1040, and we'll also bring it to the center. So let's tap margin 0 auto. Now let's add a background color, and we cannot see it clearly, so let's increase the z index a little bit. Let's set it to 500. Now here we can see that the search input container is positioned to the right. So here we also need to add left of 0 so that it's in the center. Now we need to move this input field to the right. So for that, let's make this a display of flex, and let's type justify content and set it to flex end so that it's positioned to the right. So now we can see we have the correct positioning for this search input field. And right now the search input container has a higher z index than the nav. So we need to make the z index of this input field less than this nav. So let's check the z index of this nav. And let's select this nav element, and here we can see we have a z index of 200. So for this input container, I'll set the z index to 100. Right now we can see we have the correct z index for the input field. Now let's style this input field. So let's select the input tag inside the search input container. So let's type search input container input. Right now let's go back to our Figma file and let's check what are the styles. So here we have the input field. So let's double click on this input field and let's go to the inspect tab, and if you scroll down, if you select this rectangle, here we have the styles for this rectangle. So we have a border radius, and we also have this box shadow, and we have the background color set to the light color. So let's copy these two styles from here, and I'll just paste it over here, and let's set the background color to the white color variable. So let's type light color, and let's also copy the styles of this text. So let's select this text, and here we can see that the font size is set to 24 pixels. So let's go back and let's go back to our browser, and let's see what is the font size of this menu items. So let's right click over here and click on inspect, and we have a font size set to 20 pixels. So I'll just add the same font size for this input field, because we are styling for this version right here, and for this version we have a smaller font size. So let's go back and let's set the font size to 20 pixels, and this is how it looks right now. Let's also add some padding. So let's add a padding of 12 pixels top and bottom, and let's try 32 pixels left and right, and we'll also remove the border. So let's type border none, and let's also remove the outline when we select this input field. So you can just type outline and set it to none. And now if we click on this input field, we don't have the outline. And I think we have some problems with the height of this design, because we are able to scroll down. So let's right click and let's see what's the problem. And let's select the wrapper, and I think for the wrapper we have the correct height. Let's select the hero section, and for the hero section we have set a height of 100 viewport height. So we can just remove this height from here for the hero section, and now we can see it looks alright. So let's go back to our CSS and let's go to the hero section, and I'll just remove this height of 100 viewport height. Right now everything looks alright. Right now let's add the animation for this input field. Now by default the input field should be behind this nav bar. So if you go back to our index.html file, here we can see we have added a class of active to this input field. So if you remove this active class, it will go to the top position, which is behind this nav bar. And if you add the active class over here, then it will come down. So let's remove this active class from here, and we will add and remove the active class using JavaScript. Here let's add a transition so that we have smooth animation. So let's type transition, and let's type all 400 milliseconds is. Now we need to reference some of these elements into our JavaScript. So we need to reference the input field because we need to add the active class, and we also need to reference this search icon right here. We have already linked our main.js file over here in the HTML. So let's go to our main.js file, and let's type const search icon equals document.querySelector, and we have the search icon inside this division with the class of search icon container, and in that we have the search icon. So let's type search icon container search icon, and now let's select the input. So let's type const search input equals document.querySelector, and let's go back to our HTML, and here we can see we have the search input container, and in that we have this input. So let's type search input container input, and now let's add an event listener to the search icon. So let's type search icon dot add event listener, and we will listen for the click event, and let's create an arrow function over here. Now we need to add the active class to the search input to display it. So let's type search input dot class list dot add active, and now let's go back to our design, and let's click on the search icon, and here we can see our search input field is being displayed. Right, the search input is working alright. Now we need to add a close icon when we display the search input field. So let's go back to our HTML, and here after the search icon, let's also add the close icon. So let's create an img tag, and let's type images / and I have saved it as close icon.svg, and we'll also add a class, and let's give it a class of close icon. Right, now if we go back to our HTML file, we can see that the close icon is also being displayed over here. Now if we go back to our Figma file, here we can see when we click on the search icon, it goes up and the close icon comes down in the same place. So we need to have the close icon and the search icon in the same place. So for that, let's go back to our CSS, and let's scroll up, and here we have all the styles for the nav. Now let's add some styles for the search icon container. So let's type nav search icon container. Now for this, I'll just set the position to relative, and both these images will be positioned relative to this search icon container. So now let's target both the images. So let's type nav search icon container img, and let's set the position to absolute. Now if you go back to our design, since we have added a position of absolute, this image has gone outside this wrapper. So if I just right click over here and click on inspect, here we can see the menu items, and here we can see the wrapper. So the images are outside this wrapper. So we need to add some margin right to the search icon container to make it work. So let's go back, and here for the search icon container, let's add a margin right, and let's set it to 36 pixels. And now we can see it aligns perfectly with this image. Now we need to display just one of these icons at a time. So we will add a class of active to those icons as well. So here for the search icon, let's add a class of active. And when we want to display this close icon, we will add an active class to this and remove the active class from this search icon. So let's go back to our style.css file, and here for both the images, let's set the opacity to 0 by default. And now we can see that the images are not being displayed. And when we have the active class, we will set the opacity to 1, and we'll also move it slightly to the top. So let's type transform translate y, and let's set it to 6 pixels by default. And let's also add a smooth animation. So let's type transition, and let's set it to all 400 milliseconds ease. Right, now let's write the styles for the active class. So let's type nav search icon container search icon dot active, and we'll also select the close icon. So let's type nav search icon container close icon dot active, and we need to set the opacity to 1 when we have the active class, and we'll also reset the transform translate. So let's type transform translate y, and let's set it to 0. And by default, we don't want to make it clickable, so we need to type pointer events, and let's set it to none. And when we have the active class, let's set the pointer events to auto. Right, now let's go to our main.js file, and let's select the close icon. So let's type const close icon equals document.querySelector, and here let's type search icon container close icon. And here when we click on the search icon, we need to add the active class to the close icon. So let's type close icon dot class list dot add active, and we need to remove the active class from the search icon. So let's type search icon dot class list dot remove, and let's type active over here. And let's also add an event listener for the close icon. So I'll just copy this because the code is almost the same. So let's paste it over here, and instead of search icon, let's type close icon. And here for the search input field, we need to remove the active class, and for the close icon, we need to remove the active class, and we also want to add the active class to the search icon. So let's type add over here. Right, now let's go back to our website, and let's click on the search icon, and we have the search input field displayed over here, and we also have the animation for the close icon. So now let's click on the close icon, and we have the search icon displayed. So everything is working all right. Now we also will add a cursor of pointer to these icons. So let's go back to our CSS, and here for the search icon container, let's tap cursor and let's set it to pointer. And now if we hover over this, we have this pointer and we have the search input field displayed and everything is working alright. So that's it with the animation of the search input field. Right now let's start making this responsive. So if you go back to our Figma file, so this is the version that we have designed right now and it has a width of 1280 pixels. Now if we scroll up, here we can see there are other versions as well. So this is for larger screens. Now we have to make a couple of changes in the larger screens. The first thing we need to do is change the width of the wrapper. So for this wrapper we have a width of 1040 pixels. So if you go back to our CSS, here we can see for the wrapper we have set a width of 1040 pixels. Now for this larger version we need to increase the width of the wrapper. So let's see what is the width of the wrapper. So I'll just create a rectangle. And here we can see for the rectangle we have a width of 1200 pixels. So this is the width of the wrapper. So let's delete this rectangle and let's go back to our CSS and let's create a media query. So I'll just create a comment and let's tap media queries. And let's create a media query with a min width of 1300 pixels. So whenever the width of the screen is greater than 1300 pixels, all the CSS that we have over here inside this block will be applied to our design. So let's target the wrapper over here and let's set the width to 1200 pixels. Now let's go back to our design and now if we zoom out a little bit, here we can see now we have a width of 1200 pixels for the wrapper. So if I just right click over here and click on inspect, here we can see on the bottom left of the screen we have the width of the wrapper displayed as 1200 pixels. Now if I reset the zoom, and if I open the inspector, here we can see for the width of the wrapper it is set to 1040 pixels. Right now let's go back to our Figma file and we have one more change over here in the CSS. We need to change the font size of these menu items. So if I double click on this text and if I go to inspect, here we can see for the font size it is set to 24 pixels. But if you go to the other version of the design, here we can see we have a font size of 20 pixels. So let's go back to our CSS and let's target the menu items. So if you scroll up, here we can see this is the selector of the menu items. So let's copy this selector and let's scroll down and paste it over here. And here let's tap font size and let's set it to 24 pixels. Now if I click on the search icon, here we can see that the search field is being displayed over here, but we don't have it in the correct place. So we need to change the width of this search input container as well. So let's go back to our CSS. And if we scroll up, here we can see for the search input container, we have set the width to 1040 pixels. So let's copy this selector. And let's scroll down and paste it over here. And here I'll just set the width to 1200 pixels. And now we can see the search input field is in the correct place. If I reset the zoom, here also we have the search input field in the correct place. So everything is working alright. Right now let's start with the smartphone version. So let's go back to our Figma file. And here we can see this is how the smartphone version looks. So let's go back to our CSS and let's create a new media query. So let's tap add media and we'll set the max width to 720 pixels. Now the first thing we will do is we will set the width of the wrapper to 100% of the screen width. So let's type wrapper and let's set the width to 100%. And here if you take a look at this design, here we can see we have a gap of 30 pixels from all these elements. So we need to add a padding of 30 pixels to the left and the right. So here I'll just tap padding, 0 for top and bottom and 32 pixels left and right. Right now let's go back to our Figma file and here we can see for this nav bar we have a height of 48 pixels. So let's go back and let's type nav and let's set the height to 48 pixels. And let's go back to our design and let's open the mobile version. So I'll just right click and click on inspect. And you can click on this button called toggle device toolbar. Now here you have the option of selecting different devices. I'll just select iPhone 12 Pro and let's go back to our CSS. And the next thing we need to do is we need to hide these menu items from here. So we need to hide all these menu items plus this search icon, and we need to add this menu icon over here. So let's go back to our CSS, and for the menu items we have a division. So here we can see we have this division with the class of menu items, and in that we have all these menu items plus this search icon. So let's go back to our style.css file, and here I'll just type nav menu items, and let's set the display to none. Right now the next thing we need to do is add this menu icon over here. So let's go back to our HTML, and here after this menu items division, let's create a division with the class of menu icon, and in that we will add an img tag, and in the source I'll just type images, and I have saved it as menuicon.svg. Right now let's go back to our design, and this is how it looks. I'll just zoom it out, and here we can see we have the logo on the left side and we have the menu icon on the right side. Right now the next thing we need to do is we need to change the font size of this logo. So let's go back to our Figma file, and if I double click on this logo, if I go to inspect, here we can see for the logo we have a font size of 24 pixels. So let's go back to our CSS, and let's target this logo. So here I'll just type dot logo, and let's set the font size to 24 pixels. Now the next thing we need to do is we need to bring both these sections one below the other. So right now this heading and this content is on the left side and we have the image on the right side. But if you go to our Figma file, here we can see that the image is at the top and we have all the other content at the bottom. So if you go back to our CSS and if you scroll up, we will take a look at the wrapper of the hero section. So here we can see for the hero section, for the wrapper we have set a display of flex. Now let's select the same selector over here, and here I'll just type hero section wrapper, and let's set the flex direction to column so that both the elements will be one below the other. And now we can see that both these elements are one below the other. Now we need to bring this image on the top and this text content at the bottom. So for that, let's go back to our HTML, and for the image we have this division with the class of right, and for the text content we have this division with the class of left. Now since we are using flexbox, we can just add an order to the elements. So here I'll just type hero section right, and for this we will set an order of 1. And now let's select the hero section left, and we'll set the order to 2. And now we can see that the image is at the top and the other content is at the bottom. Now here we can see we have a lot of width for this page. So let's see what's the problem. Let's right click over here and click on inspect, and let's see whether we have any element that has a lot of width. Here we can see for this search input container we have a width of 1040 pixels. Now because of this element we have a lot of width for our page, so we can just hide this element from our page. So if I go to our Figma file, here we can see the search input field is inside this navigation menu, so we can directly hide the search input container of the desktop. So let's select that. We have a division with the class of search input container, and here we already have this display of none, so I'll just add a comma, and here I'll just type search input container. And now let's go back to our design, and now we can see we have the correct width for our page. Now the next thing we need to do is we need to remove this background element of this hero image. So if we go back to our Figma file, here we can see we don't have this teal green background element for this hero image. So let's go back to our CSS, and here I'll just add the selector of the background. So here we can see we have this division with the class of hero image bg, which is inside the hero image container, and it is inside the hero section. So here I'll just add a comma, and let's type hero section hero image container hero image bg. Right now let's style this heading. So let's go back to our Figma file and let's select this heading, and for the heading we have a font size of 40 pixels. So here I'll just type hero section h1, and let's set the font size to 40 pixels. And now let's style this paragraph. So let's select this, and here we can see we have a font size of 16 pixels. And we also need to set the width of this paragraph to the full width, because here we can see we have set a limited width for this paragraph. So let's go back and let's target the paragraph. So let's tap hero section, P, and let's set the font size to 16 pixels, and we'll also set the width to 100%. Right now let's style these social media icons. So let's select this icon right here, and we have a height of 24 pixels. If you go back to our HTML file, here we can see we have this division with the class of social, and in that we have these anchor tags, and in that we have the images. So let's go back to our CSS and let's type hero section social img, and let's set the height to 24 pixels. Right now we cannot see the full height of this device, so let's just select 50% from here. And now here we can see we have these social media icons, and it is set as a position of fixed, or I think it's absolute. So if you go back to our CSS, let's check the social division. So here we can see we have set the position to absolute. And if you go back to our HTML file, here we have this left division inside the wrapper, and then we have the right division, and then we have the social. Now since we have added a position of absolute for this social, it goes outside this wrapper division. It is no longer a part of this wrapper division. So what we need to do is we need to set the position to something different. So I'll just select the social division. So I'll just tap hero section, social, and I'll set the position to static. And I will also set the order to 3 because we want it to be displayed at the end. And now we can see that the social division is also a part of this wrapper. Let's also add some padding. So I'll just tap padding, and we'll set the padding to 60 pixels top, 0 for right, 40 pixels bottom, and 0 for left. Right now the next thing we will do is we'll just remove this background shape from here, and we will add a different background shape. So if you go back to our Figma file, for the mobile version we have a different background shape. For the desktop we have a different shape. So let's hide this desktop shape from here. So if you go back to our HTML file, here we can see we have this image with a class of bg shape. So I'll just hide that. Here I'll just add a comma, and let's type bg shape. And now we need to add the mobile bg shape. So here I'll just create one more img tag, and for the source I'll just type images / and I have named it bg shape mobile.svg, and let's also give it a class. So let's set the class to bg shape mobile. And now let's go back to our style.css file, and let's target the bg shape mobile. So let's type bg shape mobile, and let's set the position to absolute, and we'll set the bottom position to 0 and the right position to 0. And now we can see we have the mobile bg shape displayed over here. Now the next thing we will do is we will set the width of this image to 100%. So right now it has a lot more width than 100%, because we can see we have less padding over here than these elements. So let's go back to our CSS, and let's target the image. So here I'll just type hero section and hero image container, and let's set the width to 100%. And we also need to set the width of the img tag. So let's type hero section, hero image container, img, and let's set the width to 100%. And we'll also set the object fit to cover so that we have the correct aspect ratio. And now here we can see we have some gap at the top. So let's right click and click on inspect, and let's see what's the problem. So let's select one of these divisions. Let's select the wrapper division, and here we can see for the wrapper we have set a height of 100 viewport height minus 72 pixels, and we also have set a margin top of 72 pixels. But now for the smartphone version we have decreased the height of this nav, so we have set it to 48 pixels. So if you scroll up, here we can see we have set the nav height to 48 pixels. So we need to set the height to 100 viewport height minus 48 pixels, and also the margin top to 48 pixels. So let's copy this selector, and let's go back to our CSS, and here we already have this selector, so we can just add the code over here. So I'll just tap margin top, and let's set it to 48 pixels, and also height of calc 100 viewport height minus 48 pixels. Now let's go back to our Figma file, and we also have some box shadow for this image. So let's select this image, and I think it's inside the photo. So here we can see we have this drop shadow. So I'll just copy this code from here, and I'll just paste it for the image. So here I'll just add the code, and now we have the drop shadow for the image. Right now let's open another device and let's see how it looks. So I'll just open iPhone SE, and this is how it looks. If you scroll down, we have the social media icons, but we don't have this background color over here. That's because we have set the height to a fixed height. So we'll just right click over here and click on inspect, and let's select the wrapper. And what we will do is we will set the height to 100%. So if I just type 100%, now it looks alright, but we will set a min height of this right here. So let's change this to min height. So it will have a minimum height of this value. So let's copy these two lines of CSS from here, and let's go back to our CSS, and I'll just paste it over here for the wrapper. And the next thing we need to do is we need to add some margin between this heading and this image. So let's go back to our CSS, and for the heading let's add some margin top, and let's set the margin top to, let's try 48 pixels, and I think that looks alright. So that's basically it with the design of the mobile version. Now the last thing we need to add in this mobile version is the navigation menu. So if you go back to the Figma file, here we can see this is how the navigation menu will look. So let's create this navigation menu. Let's go back to our code, and let's go to the HTML file, and let's create the navigation menu. I'll just create it right here. After this search input container, I'll just create a division with the class of mobile menu container. Now let's go back to our Figma file, and let's see what are the things we need. So we need to have this logo, and then we need to have this icon. So for that, let's create a division. Let's create a division with the class of logo container, and let's add the logo over here. So let's create an anchor tag, and here I'll just type d dot, and we'll also give it a class, and let's set it to logo. And we also need to add this close icon. So let's create a division with the class of close icon, and in that let's create an img tag, and in the source I'll just type images / and I have named it as closeicon.svg. Right now let's create these menu items. So let's go outside this logo container division, and let's create a division with the class of mobile menu items, and in that we will have anchor tags for all these menu items. So I'll just simply copy and paste these menu items from here. So let's copy these 3 menu items, and let's paste it over here. And now we need to add this search field and the search icon. So for that, let's create a division with the class of search input container, and in that we will have the input field, and we'll set the type to text, and we will add the placeholder, and let's set it to search here. And now we need to add this search icon. So let's create an img tag, and let's type images / and I have named it searchicon.svg. Right now let's go back to our design, and this is how it looks right now. So now let's style it. Let's go to our style.css file, and let's create a comment, mobile nav menu, and let's target the mobile menu container, which is this main container division. So let's type mobile menu container, and first of all let's set the z index to a higher value. So let's type 300, and we'll set the position to fixed, and we'll set the top to 0, and we'll also set the height to 100 viewport height and the width to 100%. And let's add a background color. So let's type background, and let's set it to the light variable. So let's type var light color, and now let's add some padding. So let's go back to our Figma file, and here we can see we have a padding of 30 pixels. So let's type padding, and let's set the padding to 30 pixels. Now the next thing we need to do is we need to bring this logo and this close icon one next to the other. So let's target the container division, So we have this division with the class of logo container. So here I'll just type mobile menu container, logo container, and let's set the display to flex and align items to the center, and also justify content to space between. Right now let's add some padding top. So let's set a padding top of 8 pixels. Right now we need to add a box shadow. So let's go back to our Figma file and let's select this rectangle. And let's go to the inspect, and if you scroll down, here's the box shadow. So let's copy this and let's paste it in this logo container. And here we can see, since we have added the padding for this mobile menu container, we can see that this is the width of the logo container, so we don't have the correct box shadow effect. So I'll just remove this padding from here, and let's add the padding to the logo container. So I'll just change this to padding, and here I'll just tap 30 pixels. Right now let's style these menu items. So for that we have a division with the class of mobile menu items. So let's type mobile menu container, mobile menu items, and first of all let's add a margin top. So let's go back to our Figma file, and here we can see we have a spacing of 61 pixels. Let's just round it to 60 pixels. So let's go back and let's type margin top, and let's set it to 60 pixels. Now we need to bring all these menu items one below the other. So let's type display of flex, and we'll also set the flex direction to column, and let's add some gap. So let's set the gap to 30 pixels. Now we need to add some padding from the left. So let's go back to our Figma file, and here we can see we have a padding of 50 pixels. So let's type padding and let's set it to 50 pixels. Right now let's style these anchor tags. So we have anchor tags inside this mobile menu items. So let's type mobile menu container, mobile menu items A, and let's go back to our Figma file and let's go to the inspect, and here we can see these are the styles. So let's copy these styles from here and let's paste it over here, and we'll just remove this font style from here, and here we'll just tap sans serif. So this is how it looks right now. Now let's style the input field. So let's see where is the input field. Let's click on inspect, and here we have this division with the class of search input container. But if we go to the styles, here we can see we have set the display to none. So we need to set the display to something different. So let's go back to our CSS, and if we scroll up here we can see that we have set the display to none for the search input container. That's because we had the same class for this desktop version. So here we have the desktop version. Now we need to display this search input container of this mobile version. So let's go back to our style.css file, and here let's type mobile menu container, search input container. Let's set the display to block, and now we can see that the search input container is being displayed over here. We can also see this red background color, so let's remove that. I think it's over here. So here we have this background color of red, so let's remove that. And now we can see that the search container is at the top. So we need to bring it below these menu items. Now it is at the top because we have set the position to absolute in the desktop version. So let's reset the position over here. So here I'll just set the position to relative. Now the next thing we need to do is we need to bring the search icon inside this input field. So here we can see that the search icon is inside the input field. So I'll just set the position of the search icon to absolute. So this is the search icon image. So let's type mobile menu container, search input container, img, and let's set the position to absolute. Now this image will be positioned relative to this search input container because we have set the position of relative over here. Right now let's style the input tag. So let's type mobile menu container, search input container, input, and let's set the width to 100%. And now here we can see that the width is more than 100% over here. That's because for the container division we had set some width in the desktop version. So if you scroll up and go to the search input container, Here we can see for the search input container we have set a width of 1040 pixels. So let's scroll down and let's change the width of this search input container to 100%. And now let's go back, and here we can see we have 100% width for the input field. Now we need to bring this search icon inside this input field. So for the img tag, let's set the right position to some value. So if we go back to our Figma file, let's see what is the padding. So here we have a padding of 24 pixels. So let's tap 24 pixels over here. And now we can see that the icon is inside the search input field. And we'll also add a top value of 50% so that it starts from the center. And we also need to type transform, translate y, and set it to -50%. And now it is exactly in the center. Now we need to add some more padding over here. So if I just type something over here, we can see that it goes behind this search icon. So let's add some padding to this input field. Let's type padding and let's set it to 16 pixels top, 60 pixels right, 16 pixels bottom, and 24 pixels left. Right, I think that's it with the search input field. Now the next thing we need to do is we need to display this navigation menu only when we click on the menu icon. So by default it should not be displayed over here. So if you go back to our Figma file, and if I just open the animation, let's click on this frame and let's go to prototype, and now let's click on present. Right, now let's click on this menu icon, and we have the navigation menu displayed over here. And if I click on this close icon, it goes back. So we need to add the same animation. So by default we need to position this navigation menu to the right. So here I'll just type transform, translate x, and let's set it to 100%. So this will move it to the right side of the screen. So if you go back to our browser, now we can see that the navigation menu is not being displayed over here. Now we'll also add a smooth transition for displaying the navigation menu. So here I'll just type transition, and let's set it to all, 900 milliseconds, cubic Bezier as the easing, and let's set it to 0.4, 0, 0.2, and 1. Now what we're going to do is when we click on the menu icon, we're going to add a class called active to this mobile menu container. So let's type mobile menu container dot active, and we will set the transform translate x to 0. Right, now let's add and remove the active class using JavaScript. So we need to reference some elements from the HTML. We need to reference the close icon because we need to remove the active class, and we also need to reference the mobile menu container because we need to add the active class to this. And we also need to reference the menu icon, which is right here. So we have these classes: menu icon, close icon, and mobile menu container. So let's go to our main.js file and let's type const, and we already have this constant with the name of close icon. So let's name it mobile close icon, and let's set it equal to document.querySelector, and it is inside mobile menu container, and in that we have this division of the class of close icon. Right, now let's type const mobile menu container equals document.querySelector mobile menu container, and we also need to reference the menu icon. So let's type const menu icon equals document.querySelector, and let's go back to our HTML, and it is inside the nav. So inside the nav we have this menu icon division. So let's type nav menu icon. Right, now let's add an event listener to this menu icon. So I'll just type menu icon dot add event listener, and let's set it to click, and let's create an arrow function, and we need to add the active class to the mobile menu container. So let's type mobile menu container dot class list dot add active, and we need to remove the active class when we click on the close icon. So let's type close icon, and we need to select mobile close icon dot add event listener, and let's listen for the click event, and let's create an arrow function, and here we'll just type mobile menu container dot class list dot remove, and here let's type active. Right, now let's go back to our design and let's see how it looks. So let's click on this menu icon, and we have the menu displayed over here, and if I click on this close icon, it goes back. So the animation is working all right. So that's basically it with the mobile version of our design. Now let's check out the desktop version and let's see whether we have any problems in that. So I'll just right click over here and I'll just click on this button called Toggle Device Toolbar. And now we can see this is how the desktop version looks. So we have the menus of the mobile version also displayed over here. So we need to hide this, and also we need to hide this menu icon. And then we also need to hide the mobile background image over here. So let's do that. Let's go back to our CSS and let's go to the desktop version. So this is where the styles for the desktop version ends. So here inside hidden items, let's type BG shape mobile and also nav menu icon. So if you go back to the HTML file, here we can see that we have this division with the class of menu icon. So we need to hide this in the desktop version, and we also need to hide this division with the class of mobile menu container. So let's add that over here as well, mobile menu container, and let's set the display to none. And now we can see that the desktop version looks alright. Let's also check this search button, and it looks alright. Right, now let's open the mobile version once again. And now we can see that the menu icon is not being displayed over here, and we also don't have the background shape displayed over here. So let's go back, and inside the media query for the mobile version, we need to set the display to block. So I'll just copy these lines of code from here, and let's paste it over here, and let's set the display to block. And now let's go back to our mobile version, and now we can see everything looks alright. Let's click on this menu icon, and the menu items are displayed over here. Let's click on this close icon, and it is also working alright. Now here in the mobile version, if I click on this image, the image rotates. So we need to remove this rotate animation from the mobile version. So let's go back to our CSS, and if we scroll up, and let's take a look at the hover effect. So here we can see that we are setting this rotate Z for this hero image container. So let's copy this code from here, and let's scroll down, and let's paste it over here in the media query. And here I'll just set the rotation to 0. And now if you click on this, it doesn't rotate. Alright, so that's basically it with the code of our website. And with that, we have completed converting our Figma design to a real website using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Right, so that's basically it for this video. I will leave the link of the source code in the description. And if you have any doubts, you can ask in the comments below. And if you like this video, please click on the like button and subscribe to this channel to get the latest video updates. Thanks a lot for watching. Have a nice day.